Chapter 6. The history of Matthias the high priest, the son of Jochanan, who is the son of Hezmai the priest. A certain man named Matthias, the son of Jochanan, fled to one of the mountains which were fortified. And the men who were scattered abroad fled thither to him, and some concealed themselves in secluded places. But after that Antiochus had departed to a greater distance from the country, Matthias sent his son Judas secretly into the cities of Judah, to certify them of his own and his people's health, and to desire that as many as were inspired with courage, magnanimity, and zeal for religion for their wives and their children should come unto him. And certain of the higher orders of the people, who had stayed behind, went out to him, who, when they were come to him, said to them, Nothing is left to us but prayer to God and confidence in him, and a fight with our enemies, if perhaps God will give assistance and the victory over them. And the people assented to the opinion of Matthias, and they acted according to it. And it was told to Felix, and he marched against them with a great army. And word was brought to him, while on his march, that about 1,000 of the people of the Jews, men and women mixed, were assembled together, and dwelling in a certain cave, that they might be enabled to preserve their own way of worship. And he turned aside to them with some part of his troops, sending the commanders of his men with the rest of the army against Matthias. Now Felix demanded from those who were in the cave that they should come out to him and consent to enter into his religion, but they refused. Whereupon he threatened that he would put smoke under them, and they endured that and did not come out to him, but he put smoke under them, and they all died. And when the generals of his army were marching against Matthias, and came even to him, he being ready for battle, one of the generals of noble blood went to him, proposing to him to obey the king, and that he should not oppose his authority, so that he might himself live, and those who were with him, and might not perish. To whom he said, I indeed obey God, the true king, but do you obey your king, and do whatsoever seems good to you? And he ceased from speaking. And they began to lay snares for him. And there came a certain man of the worst of the Jews who were with them, and excited them to march against him and to prepare war. But Matthias rushed on him with his drawn sword, and cut off the Jew's head, and he struck the general to whom the Jew was speaking, and slew him also. But Matthias's companions, seeing what he had done, hastened to him, and they burst into the camp of the enemy, slaying great numbers of them, and put them to flight. Afterwards they pursued the fugitives until they slew the whole of them. After this Matthias blew the trumpet, and proclaimed an expedition against Felix. He and his companions entered into the land of Judah, and took possession of very many of their cities. And the Most High God gave them rest by his hands from the generals of Antiochus, and they returned to the observance of their own religion, and the bands of their enemies retreated from before them. Chapter 7. The account of the death of Matthias, and the acts of Judas his son after him. Now Matthias became infirm, and when he was near to death he called his sons, who were 5, and said unto them, I know of a certainty that very many and great wars will be kindled in the land of Judah, for the sake of those matters for the which the great and good God has stirred us up to wage war against our enemies. But I charge you that you fear God, and trust in him, and be zealous for the law and the sanctuary, and the people also, and prepare yourselves to wage war against its enemies. And fear not death, because without doubt this is decreed unto all men. So that, if God shall make you victorious, you have at once obtained that which you were longing for, but if you fail, that is no loss to you in his sight. And Matthias died and was buried, and his sons did according to that which he had commanded them, and they agreed to make their brother Judas their leader. Now Judas their brother was the best in counsel, and bravest in strength of them all. And an army was sent against them by Felix, under a man who was called Seron, whom Judas with his company put to flight, and he slew great numbers. And the fame of Judas was spread abroad, and increased greatly in the ears of men, and all the nations which were round about him feared him exceedingly. And it was told to King Antiochus what Matthias and his son Judas had done. News of this came also to the king of the Persians, so that he played false with Antiochus, departing from his friendship, following the example of Judas, which, giving Antiochus a great deal of uneasiness, he called to him one of his household officers named Lysias, a stout and brave man, and said to him, I have now determined to go into the land of Persia to make war, and I wish to leave behind me my son in my stead, and to take with me the half of my army, and to leave the remainder with my son. And behold, I have given you the governance of my son, and the governance of the men whom I leave with him. And verily, you know what Matthias and Judas have done to my friends and my subjects. Wherefore, send one to lead a powerful army into the land of Judah, and command him to attack the land of Judah with the sword, and to root them out, and to demolish their dwellings, and to destroy all traces of them. Then Antiochus departed into the country of Persia. But Lysias made ready 3 hardy and brave generals, skilled in war, of whom one was named Ptolemy, the second Nicanor, and the third Gorgias. And with them he sent 40,000 chosen troops and 7,000 horsemen. He also charged them to bring with them an army of Syrians and Philistines, and ordered them to root out the Jews entirely. And they marched forth, carrying with them a multitude of merchants, that they might sell to them the captives which they were about to obtain from among the Jews. But tidings of this came to Judas the son of Matthias, and he went to the house of the great and good God, and assembled his men, and enjoined them a fast, and supplications, and prayers to the great and good God, and charged that they should beseech him for victory against their enemies, which thing they did. After this, Judas collecting his men appointed over each 1,000 chiefs, and likewise over each 100, and over each 50, and over each 10. Then he commanded proclamation to be made by trumpets throughout his army, that whosoever was fearful, and whomsoever God commanded to be dismissed from the army, he should return home. And great numbers returned, and there remained with them 7,000 stout and brave men, skilled in wars and accustomed thereto. Nor had any one of them ever fled, and they marched against their enemies. But when they had drawn nigh to them, Judas prayed to his Lord, entreating him that he would turn away from him the malice of his enemy, and that he would assist him and render him victorious. Then he commanded the priests to sound the trumpets, which they did, and all his men called upon God, and rushed upon the army of Nicanor. And God gave them victory over them, and they turned him and his men to flight, killing of them 9,000 men, and the rest were dispersed. And Judas and his company returned to Nicanor's camp, and made spoil of it, and plundered very much property of the merchants, and sent it to be divided among the sick. This battle took place on the 6th day of the week, wherefore Judas and his men remained on the same spot until the Sabbath day had passed. Then they marched against Ptolemy and Gorgias, whom they found and defeated, and gained a victory over them, slaying 20,000 of their troops. And Ptolemy and Gorgias fled, whom Judas and his company pursued. Yet he could not overtake them, because they betook themselves into a city of 2 idols, and fortified themselves therein with the remnant of their army. And Judas attacked Felix, and he was put to flight before him, and Judas pursued him, who, coming to a certain house which was nigh at hand, entered into it and closed the doors, for it was a fortified house. And Judas commanded, and he set fire to it, and the house was burned, and Felix was burned in it. So Judas took vengeance on him for Eleazar and the others whom Felix had put to death. Afterward the people returned to the slain and took their spoils and their armor, but the best of the prey they sent into the Holy Land. But Nicanor departed in disguise unknown, and returned to Lysias, and told him all which had happened to him and his company.